Jayden Daniels hanging out with his boy Brandon Aiyuk. All of a sudden, Aiyuk is on, posting a video on TikTok where he's saying they don't want me here. They, the San Francisco Niners, here with the Niners in San Francisco. The question through a DC lens is very simple. Do you want Brandon Aiyuk here? If that's the question, the answer should be yes, because Brandon Aiyuk is awesome and he's everything that you want in a Washington Commander. Like, if you watched, by the way, did you watch the latest episode of Commander's Log?
I did not.
The behind-the-scenes documentary show that they do?
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, my God, it's so good. It's like 50 minutes long. They went long with it, and it is, one, it has some of the behind-the-scenes of Darryl Green learning of his number getting retired, which was awesome. A+. Definitely wasn't crying in the Hoffman house. Nope, not two Hoffmans crying. That was not happening. But then they got into the draft stuff, and it was really, really good. And they, on their draft board, obviously they rank prospects, but they also give out what they call a commander's tag. It's like a gold tag, and it's like, this is from an attitude, approach, everything, physicality, whatever standpoint, all that stuff. These guys fit what we want to be and who we want to be are from a culture. And their first 4, if not 5 picks, all were, and they only gave the tag out to 20 guys. And they got like at least their first 4, I think, if not their first 5, were all Commanders. And Aiyuk, if they were doing a free agent version of that board, would 1,000,000% have that tag. He is tough as nails. He blocks. He's also got positional size. He's fast. Like, there's just so much to love about Brandon Aiyuk, the football player. The problem is you have the contract you have to give Brandon Aiyuk, the football player, and I don't know whether it's smart to do that in 2024. And there's just a reality that I know it's easy to poo-poo this because you're like, oh, you're telling me that the veteran receivers that are great aren't better than these rookies, but like, you're not going to bat 1,000, but it's a lot easier to find a good wide receiver in the draft these days. And it goes to the development pipeline of 7-on-7 and lower levels of youth football. It used to be the best athletes at the youth level or running backs, but now tackle football isn't played as much at the lower levels. So the wide receivers are getting to be the best athletes, and especially once you get into like middle school and some of this 7-on-7 stuff starts to develop. And you go from the best guy with the best athlete playing quarterback or running back and just being handed the ball or taking off and running to like, okay, now we're trying to get them out in space and make plays down the field and 7-on-7 it. A lot of the best athletes are quarterbacks and a lot of the other ones are wide receivers. And so once you get into the spread stuff that has taken over high school and college football, now you've had like real reps developing good route running skills. There's a lot of good coaches out there coaching that stuff, both in 7-on-7 and 11-on-11. And now there's a wider swath of guys who can get it done at the pro level. I think the elite guys are still elite, and I think Aiyuk falls in that category. But if you've already paid Terry, can you afford to pay Aiyuk? And this, I think, is like the core question of it. Then you have the other secondary core question of, would you give up anything to get him? And if it involves 3rd round or higher draft capital, do you just trust Adam Peters to use that pick in a way that is better for the team and that cap space in a way that's better for the team down the road as opposed to signing Aiyuk? That's the question.
I don't think the money matters that much here in this situation, just because, again, we see around the NFL teams investing heavily at that position, and it, proven to be very beneficial. You look at the Eagles; they just paid Devontae Smith. You look at the Dolphins; they just paid Jalen Waddle after already paying Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown with the Eagles. So we're
both those teams have had to make decisions in other places. Like, that's the problem.
Yeah. What players do we have on our team where we're investing heavily outside of defensive tackle and then Terry?
Well, it's a great question. The problem is you also don't have a lot of other players, though, for like long term, right? I mean, they just flipped half the roster, and like more than half of those guys are on 1-year deals. I mean, what's absolutely crazy, I'm looking at the 2024 active roster cap table on Spotrac right now. Mm-hmm. Terry has the biggest cap hit this year at 24-1. Duran is next at 21-6. John is at 21-4. Wiley is next at 9.4. And then Jayden Daniels has the, what am I, fifth or sixth? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth biggest cap hit this year at 6.8. That's crazy.
Insane.
But to me, like, you can afford it, and you could even try to front load it. But Terry's only got 2 years left. So this becomes your issue, is Terry is entering his age 29 season. Next year, he will cost you $23.6. Mm-hmm. There's a void year that's 5.6 after that. So he'll have a dead cap of 5.6, barring you signing him to some kind of extension that moves that around. But that number can only go up. But just you would have Terry instead of it being a dead cap number. But you really are in a pretty ridiculously good spot to be flexible. And if you want Aiyuk and you see him as your future one with Terry for maybe 2 years and then you let Terry walk, he's going to be on the wrong side of 30, and that is the reality of the NFL. The question is then, what are you doing with Jahan? And this is where, like, I think letting this season play out for both Aiyuk and the Commanders could actually work out. If Jahan Dotson flourishes this year in this offense, you just move forward with Jahan being a huge part of what you do moving forward. If Jahan struggles like he did last year, maybe you can convince the 49ers that Kyle can fix him and you flip him, or you just say, hey, like, he's going to be on his 5th year. We're going to have a sick receiving core, and hopefully we can get more out of him in the slot or whatever in his final year, but we're not going to re-sign him long term, and you just play out the contract, but you pay Aiyuk. I think the problem right now is you're looking at potential Terry extension next year, unless you want to let him play on the final year of his deal. A potential Jahan extension in 2 years, I think. Jahan Dotson.
Yeah, because it's about to be year 3 for him.
This is year, yeah. He's got 1 year left. They've got to decide on his 5th year option in the spring.
Yep.
But next year could be his last year, and it's, $5.8 million. Diami's in the final year of his deal. So, like, it's not unreasonable once you understand the future of that position for your team. The problem, I think, for the Commanders of doing something preemptively for Aiyuk right now is, one, I think they want to see, like, how quickly they're going to be good. Like, how good is Jayden this year? And two, they don't know the future of that position or really the future of any position on the team, including defensive tackle. They have a very blank slate outside of quarterback moving forward. And so it's really hard to commit to anything right now. I think that's the challenge. As Brandon Aiyuk seems to be someone who is not on the same page with the 49ers, and I think that's an important clarification, because it's not like he's not in the 49ers' long-term plans, but he's not currently under a long-term contract, and he wants one. Is that something the Commanders should pursue? We have Bonte Hill on at 5 o'clock to discuss 95.7 The Game host out in the Bay Area, and he said there have been some explorations of trades. They will answer the phone. And this becomes another part of the question, Anthony, is like, what are you willing to give up? Because financially, the Commanders could do it. Financially, right now, the Commanders could do literally anything. They have the most cap space in the league. They have no major future commitments. They have no position group that is like, oh, that's locked in. Because John Allen is up soon. Daron Payne is up soon. / those guys can be moved on from sooner with minimal dead cap. Terry McLaurin, same thing. Obviously, eventually you'll need to extend Jahan Dotson or let him move on. But like, that's kind of the point, is they can do any number of things and take this in any number of directions to be either a team that is maybe competitive in a couple of years, or if Jayden Daniels shows the type of promise that he showed in the spring, in the fall, you kick that thing into high gear and be like, oh, we're on a rookie quarterback timeline with a guy who can win in the first couple of years. We need to be really aggressive. Because I think if you tell me if Jayden Daniels goes out and wins Rookie of the Year and looks like 90% or more of what CJ Stroud was, I want Brandon Aiyuk here next year. I want to make that deal. I also would like many other things because the Commanders can win soon. If he is more of a regular rookie where you're like, that was good, but it's going to be till year 3 or year 4 before he really shines, even if we see more and more flashes as we go, then I'm willing to be more patient. So that to me is part of the equation. But there's also the what would you give up? Because I saw a trade today that I thought was interesting for a guy like Aiyuk, which was De'Ami Brown, which, okay, if I'm the Niners, De'Ami Brown's actually kind of interesting because part of what makes Aiyuk so valuable to them is he's a phenomenal blocker, and De'Ami's not as good as Aiyuk is, but he's a willing blocker who does have enough speed to take the top off of defense and thus open up the underneath stuff for McCaffrey and Samuel, and he becomes a different kind of player out there with some useful traits. But like De'Ami Brown, a second and a fourth. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to give up that second. And it's like, it's Brandon Aiyuk. And if I'm the Niners, I'm like, it's Brandon Aiyuk. Yeah, you're giving up a second. You're lucky we're not making you give up a first. But that's the thing, is I trust Adam Peters in the draft, and I want to keep that long-term flexibility that giving up a piece like that is really hard to part with.
Yeah, that is very rich. A second, a fourth, and De'Ami. Who would you say has the leverage in this situation, though? Would you say because to me it sort of seems like Aiyuk doesn't necessarily want to be there, and just because he doesn't necessarily want to be there doesn't mean they have to like move off of him. But what does that do for the locker room, the distractions to the team? Like, what kind of noise? What does this noise do for that team?
I mean, I think the Niners. One, things are always a little bit louder in media circles, and Brandon Aiyuk putting something on TikTok is very different than what it actually is playing in the actual Niners organization. So that would be thing one. Two, once you get into the season, these things tend to die down. So there's an element of patience here that I think you're willing to have. And ultimately, the Niners have the upper hand in negotiations because they have the asset. They have Brandon Aiyuk, who's the guy that other teams want. And if you're the Niners, it could be the Commanders, it could be the Steelers, it could be any other number of teams that want Brandon Aiyuk. If you're the Commanders and you want to go get your new franchise quarterback's best friend who also plays the game exactly like you want and fits a need for you offensively, if you see that as a need, if not just a really high level want, there's no second Brandon Aiyuk. So of course the Niners have the leverage here.
Okay. So if they do have the leverage, maybe we do have to like give up a little bit more. I'm more so all in on the deal just because, again, I look at what CJ did last year and the talent he had around him. The Nico Collins of the world, Tank Dell, he was a surprise to like many.
But that's the thing, right? Is Tank Dell was a surprise, and he
Yeah.
cost a hell of a lot less than Brandon Aiyuk.
Yeah.
And that's the count. To me, that's the strongest counter is look at the wide receiver class this year. How many guys do we think can come in and play right away? A ton. So if I can get 75 to 80% of Brandon Aiyuk this year at 1/10 of the price, why would I go spend the money? My retort would be potentially that it's worth the premium. And that's ultimately like what Adam Peters has to decide. And luckily for Washington, Adam Peters has a better insight into Brandon Aiyuk than anyone, being around there the last bunch of years and being an integral part of why he was drafted. And you have the bonus of if that makes Jayden more comfortable and you actually see the friendship and him having his best friend around is a good thing, which I don't see why you wouldn't. I could see where that in a different world with different guys could be a different kind of thing. But I think with the relationship those two have and who they are as men, that would ultimately be seen as a positive that like it's worth it. I think the real question too is like, would you give up Dotson? And one for one, telling San Francisco, hey, we're going player for player. We are buying you an extra year to deal with your cap situation. You're going to take it. If I'm San Francisco, I'm like, he doesn't really fit us. He's not physical enough. He's not, he doesn't have the makeup to be who we are, which is why you're willing to give him up in the first place, because you're trying to build what we are. But, you know, Dots, like, if I tell you, if I'm John Lynch and I'm like, hey, Adam, hey, old buddy, I know you want Aiyuk. I know you got to pay him. So that brings the price down a little bit. Give me Dotson in a fifth. You do it? If you're Peters?
I think I do it just because I know what I'm getting with, you know, Brandon Aiyuk. Also, this is more security for my rookie quarterback. I know I have Terry. I know I have a stud in him. Jahan was a little questionable just because of the second year that he had. But I know with this guy, Brandon Aiyuk, we also got Zach Ertz. We got some veterans around him. We got Austin Eckler out of the backfield as well. I'm doing everything in my power to surround my rookie quarterback with some help, some guys that can get open quick, sure-handed, physical at the line, things of that nature. Those are the intangibles I'm looking for, and I know with this guy, Brandon Aiyuk, that is what I'm willing to give up to get this guy.
You tell me it's Dotson in a fifth, and I'm so sorry, Jahan, because I really like Jahan Dotson as a dude. And by the way, I like Jahan Dotson a lot as a player. I do not blink twice about that deal. And I would pay Aiyuk. Because long-term, he is who we want to be. Mm-hmm. He'll block his face off in the running game. And he's going to elevate Terry. Because Terry can no longer be like, oh, I'm the physical one, I'm whatever. Because there were some times last year that Terry, I don't think, played to the standard that is going to be expected of him this year by a Dan Quinn, by an Adam Peters. And like, Adam Peters has a say here because Adam Peters is in charge of his future contract extension. And so, because you're on the rookie quarterback timeline, you can afford to pay two guys, especially if neither of them gets top money, which Terry won't when he's up. He'll get top 15 money maybe by the time he's in his 30s. Aiyuk is going to get top 10 money and deserves it. But as the cap continues to climb and you're on a rookie quarterback contract and you don't have any other major investments, you probably need to like you have a Sam Cosmi extension coming. That's going to be really, really expensive. You know, you might have to go sign a left tackle if one becomes available or try to trade for one. Like there's some pass rusher, obviously, like you're eventually going to have to do that. But I do think that because teams are zigging and not really paying wide receivers as much right now, unless they've got one of them elite dudes like a JJ, that like zagging when some other team's zigging might not be the worst move. Everyone's going to be looking for wide receivers in the draft. Just go get a guy who you know is everything you want. I don't have a huge problem with it. I don't think you have to do it, but for the right compensation, paying him $26 a year doesn't really faze me with their current cap situation.
How important do you think building a roster with guys that are experienced, guys that you know, is to, you know, the Adam Peters of the world and the Cliff Kingsbury? Like, how important would you say that is, just with Jayden Daniels anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely helps if you know what you're getting day in, day out of guys, and you know what their strengths are. You can program to that, if you will. You can scheme to that. You can design to that. And so that's part of been the figuring out process. Like this is, I was talking to, I don't remember if this was an on or off the record conversation. I think it was on the record, but I'll just say I was talking to someone with the Wizards at the press conference for introducing Keefe and everybody a couple weeks ago. And it was basically like, we know our players better now. Like part of our problem is last year we came in with an idea, we had watched all the film, whatever, but like we'd never seen these guys practice. It's easier for us to build the team this year because we realistically know who Kyle Kuzma is and what his limitations are. You know, last year it was like, this is what he's done. here's what he could be. And now we're like, some of that could be is actually not a could be. He's not going to hit that. Or Jordan Poole or Tyus Jones or whatever. And so it's going to take a year for Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury and Joe Witt and the position coaches to understand who these guys are and thus what they can fully do with them. If Adam Peters brings in Aiyuk and he goes to Bobby Ingram and Cliff Kingsbury and he's like, hey, wide receivers coach and offensive coordinator, this is exactly who he is. I know this player like the back of my hand. The coaches are going to take some time, but at least they have a full understanding of exactly who he is and what he can and can't do, which would be different than almost any other player on the roster, which is not nothing.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.